Thanks very much for joining us. We are giving the politicians a little rest this week and ourselves as well, so we can talk about a bunch of different things that are happening with local politics with two must-read local political reporters. To the left of your screen, Kelly Garrity of Politico, author of the Massachusetts Playbook, and Gin Dumcius, reporter for CommonWealth Beacon and author of the book This Way to City Hall, about the 2013 race for mayor. Kelly, Gin, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. So let's start with the mayoral race, which I sort of feel has been getting a little short shrift, but it's time to start looking more closely at that. Josh Kraft, the main challenger to Mayor Wu, has put out thoughtful position papers. He's run digital ads. He's collected some endorsements. Michelle Wu has moved to diffuse potentially damaging issues like the bike lanes, gone after critics like the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, and is clearly trying to dress Kraft in a Trump costume. So let me start with you, Gin, since you wrote the book here. Do we have a real mayoral race, or is this, at least so far, more like a pretend race?
Yeah, the way I've been kind of thinking about it is like right now it's more of a campfire than a barn burner. It's very much kind of, low heat. What I think all of us are kind of looking for is when the big money comes, not just $1 million from a New Balance CEO, owner Jim Davis, but real
a Kraft donor.
A Kraft donor.
Yeah.
Because we're looking for the super PACs to really get involved on both sides, where the unions are expected to come in big for Wu. So I think that's all still in formation behind the scenes. I think there's a lot of action happening, but it really hasn't broken out into the public realm yet.
All sorts of secondary, if you'll pardon the expression, candidates are starting to pop up. Again, you wrote about one this past week, a lawyer who works at Boston City Hall. Kelly, what do you make of these, of this field here? Are these straw candidates?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to tell for a little while. A lot of people are still out there actually collecting signatures.
Yeah.
There's still plenty of time for that. So I don't think we'll know, honestly, for a few weeks at least. There is the first mayoral forum is happening next week. So I think that will give us more of a sense of kind of who some of these candidates are. I know Mayor Wu is going to be there, Josh Kraft is going to be there. I'm not sure at this point who else has RSVP'd for that, but I think that will kind of give us at least an early sense of what the field is looking like.
Well, speaking of candidates for re-election, Governor Healey is running for another term as governor, ostensibly, but she's also all over national TV. You had an interesting column about this recently. She's doing news shows. She's doing comedy shows. I half expect to see her on Jeopardy sometime soon. What's going on here, Kelly?
Yeah, I think her team will say these people are asking us to go on, and we just say yes. And I do think a lot of it, especially there was a lot of news about Harvard, based in Massachusetts, obviously, so that definitely brought her on to a lot of these, the national stage more. But yeah, I think, as I think Gin will talk about too, there's definitely been sort of a lot more of her in the national spotlight with Trump back, and sort of after an early period where she was being a little less critical of him. She's kind of back to her old AG days of really using him as a foil. And I think that helps her, not just for her national profile, but I think it's also going to be really useful for her in the 2026 race. Trump is not popular here, right. And so it's kind of a good way to sort of campaign while rising above some of the local issues that have actually been sort of a burden for her in her early years as governor.
And besides, come on, this is Massachusetts. There can't be a presidential race without at least 5 or 12 candidates from Massachusetts in it, right, Gin?
Absolutely, and I think what we've seen over the last couple of presidential cycles is even if you lose the presidential race, you're still kind of winning in some case if you get a cabinet position out of it, or you become part of the DC firmament. So I think it's one of those things of like, if she does end up running for president, is she running to win, or is she running for another position in that orbit? And
in the meantime, we're talking about it, so
exactly.
It's a win-win. All right, hold that thought. We'll continue our conversation with our reporter roundtable in just a moment, so please stay with us. Welcome back to our conversation with two ace State House reporters and local political reporters, Gin Dumcius of CommonWealth Beacon, Garrity of Politico. So among the notables up for re-election next year is Senator Ed Markey. He will turn 80 in July of next year. Inarguably has a lot of energy. He seems like he's everywhere. You turn on the TV and there's Ed Markey. But there is a lot of buzz in Democratic circles generally about how it's time for senior figures to move on. I mean, going back to the whole Biden age issue. Time for them to move on and clear the way for younger voices. We've seen Dick Durbin, who's a contemporary of Markey's, the senator from Illinois, announce he's not running. Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire. Again, let's start with you here. Is age a potential issue for Ed Markey?
Yes. And if you ask around, if you ask Democrats if they think Ed Markey should run again, they'll tell you no. If you ask them to say that publicly, they say no.
So Democrats like insider types?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Yes. No, okay. I mean, there's the people that Kelly and I check in with regularly.
Right.
So I think there's definitely a sense of folks who are saying, like, he shouldn't run again. But nobody wants to say it out loud, at least not yet.
Well, I mean, the generation gap, if you'll pardon the expression, was a sort of an implicit issue in the 2020 race with young Joe Kennedy there. That didn't seem to matter, although that race was complicated in many ways. What do you make of this, Kelly? Do you think there's a problem here? Again, stipulating that Markey is a pretty vital 79-year-old.
Yeah, I think age is just going to be something that keeps coming up for him. And right now, like you mentioned, he has tons of energy and he's been going everywhere to all of these protests, doing lots of events in the state. So he's definitely trying to get ahead of that, but it's not gonna, you don't age backwards, so it's not gonna stop being a question. I mean, I think the real question is whether somebody actually does decide to run against him. And I think you mentioned the 2020 race. People can look at that, and that is definitely something you would consider if you're thinking about challenging him, is looking at what happened there and seeing what happened with Joe Kennedy. And Markey ended up winning that race by double digits. And so do you really feel like, if you're another sitting member of Congress, do you feel like actually doing that challenge when you could wait a couple years and there's potentially a special election where you could run and not lose your seat?
Well, Jake Auchincloss, the congressman from Joe Kennedy's old district, the 4th District, has refused to disclaim interest in a possible run. He's clearly an ambitious guy on the make. Any other names floating around that have caught your eye?
I mean, I think the Herald report. So we're talking about Democratic primary, right?
Yeah, right. Democratic primary.
The GOP. There could be a GOP primary, but that remains to be seen. I think folks do throw out Ayanna Pressley's name as well, but unclear what her interest is. I mean, I think anytime she travels outside the district to another part of Massachusetts for an event, people in the room are like, is she trying to set the scene for a Senate run?
Right.
So the speculation is out there for sure. I think if Markey does step back, then that opens it up to, all sorts of folks. A lot of money, maybe not so much name recognition.
Oh, that'll be a cattle call if that were to happen. One other name we should mention, John Deaton, the Republican who had, by Republican standards, a reasonably creditable showing in a landslide loss to Senator Warren last year, is looking it over. Do you see any path for someone like him? Not a Trump fan.
Yeah, I think for any Republican running statewide now, it'll be different from this past election when now Trump is back in office. And so that's just going to be a factor for any Republican that's looking at a statewide race in Massachusetts, and it's going to make it a lot harder. I think for someone like John Deaton, who was pretty critical of Trump the last time around, it would be interesting to see what that would look like, and if there would be a Republican primary that would be kind of tricky for him to have to navigate now that Trump is back in office.
That's always an issue. Yeah. Well, listen, unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you both very much. Never a dull moment around here. We will look forward to having you back again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us. Right now, back over to my colleagues for much, much more WBZ News.